everyone. I'm here with a book update. So I'm going to try to do these about once a month, just let you know what I'm reading and do a little review on things, let you know what I think of books, whether you should get them or not. If you're interested in them, you can see a little bit about what they're about, that kind of thing. On my Patreon, through the Coven, we are doing a witchy book club. It's kind of like a little side thing. And right now we are reading, just so you know, Tarot for Troubled Times by Teresa Reed and Shaheen Miro. So we're going through this book right now, which I'll talk about in a bit as well. So if you want to join us, feel free to click on the links below. So I'm going to talk about first books I finished reading, and then I'm going to talk about the books I'm kind of like halfway through. So the first book, I did talk about this in my favorites video just a couple of weeks ago, but I did finish it, is The Positive Shift by Catherine Sanderson, PhD. I really enjoyed this book. I'm not really big on the whole rah-rah positivity all the time. Just think good thoughts and good things will happen to you, because I don't think that's the way the world works. I do agree, though, for the most part, being positive in general is very good for you. It makes things in your life easier and better and your relationships better, but I don't think it should be at the expense of ignoring the hard stuff. That's called spiritual bypassing, where you just pretend that difficult things don't exist. I don't agree with that. Or people who believe in what's called the just world theory, which is like, well, people are suffering because they must have thought bad things, or that's their life contract, which just excuses you from helping other people, which I think is garbage. But we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is just generally people who think positive overall have better health, they live longer lives, and generally, it has like some actual quantifiable benefits for you. So that's where this is coming from. So it's not really coming from a new agey perspective. This is a psychologist, and she refers to all these scientific studies on it. So it's very, very interesting. And also, I really love this cover. Can we talk about this cover with all of its jewel tones? So nice. So the way that she divides the book is she talks first about mindset, people's mindsets, and how especially she talks a lot about people's perceptions about aging. So there's studies that show that even talking about negative ideas about aging, like, you'll lose your memory, you're going to be slower, you're going to hurt more, even talking about that had an effect on people. So they had one group of people write just sort of neutral phrases. They had another group write phrases that had words like old and tired and forgetful and things like that. And then they timed how long it took those people to get to the elevator down the hall. And the people in the group that used like the old and tired phrases took longer to get to the elevator. So it even like on a subconscious level can affect us. And of course, we're surrounded in the media by all sorts of messages about aging, because people want to sell us products, and how important it is to kind of combat some of those thoughts, and that people who have positive expectations of aging are more likely, their health is generally better, and they generally live longer. So very interesting how mindset really affects things on a health level. Also forgetfulness, how mindset affects memory. So people who expect to have memory loss, or who even just talk about memory loss in older adults, they were tended to be more forgetful than those who didn't. So very interesting, all these little scientific studies that were done on people. Also mindset, like personality matters, talking about how some of us are a little more like Tiggers and some are more like Eeyores, and she assures you that she's not naturally a Tigger. She's not super bouncy all the time, that she's tends to be more of an Eeyore, but that even for us that tend to be a little more Eeyore-y, like myself, that we can make shifts that do benefit us for sure. So it's very interesting. It's kind of nice to have somebody who isn't all like, oh, so you're naturally positive. Comparison, how bad comparing yourself to others is. There's a whole chapter on that, and how people who go on social media more tend to be unhappier than those who don't, because social media is set up to compare. We're always, people post the highlight reels, and so people think, oh, that person's life is perfect, because we're not seeing all the stuff that's behind the scenes. So it actually has negative effects on our mental health. about embracing adversity, how trauma, which is something that happens to all of us. They were talking about these studies where people who did not have a lot of, or had no trauma or very little in their early lives, had trouble dealing with when they're older. But if you also have too much trauma on the other end, that's also really bad for you too. So there seems to be like this little sweet spot where it makes you a little more resilient. Now, of course, she's not saying trauma is good for you, but she's saying like people who looked at it as like, what can I learn from this? Or people who were like, I'm going to help people because of this, tended to do better and recover better from trauma. Also, people who tried to find meaning had better recovery rates than those who didn't. So no one can assign meaning to you, and I really hate it when people try to assign meaning to someone else, but it's saying that people who found some kind of meaning, even if it was, I'm going to help the next person that has this kind of trauma, tended to recover better and to do better overall than those who didn't. So it's very interesting, those kind of studies. There is some trigger warning in that chapter because they do talk about some traumatic events. Part 3 is about different things that seem to help people to be more positive. Everything from people who read fiction books. People who read books tend to be happier than people who don't. Getting a good night's sleep is good for you. People who share with others, who volunteer, tend to be more positive and happier. So there's all these just like practical things that you can do that tend to make people more positive. So it's a very interesting book. I really like stuff that has kind of like, these research studies in it. And she's not like fluffy, which I really enjoy. Now, on the other end of the scale, a book I did read that is much more fluffy is the Super Attractor book by Gabrielle Bernstein. She is a New Thought leader she's a Hay House author. Now, this book is definitely more on the side of the fluffy positivity. And when I say fluffy, I mean just think nice and good things will happen to you. I have to say that she does, mention things in there like, that she's not totally, everything will just be great if you think happy thoughts. But what she does talk about is how, if we're feeling crappy, we can't just immediately go to, oh, I feel great and everything's wonderful. That's unrealistic. So I do appreciate that she did talk about that, and how sometimes just shifting it a slight bit, like moving from despair to anger, can actually be better, and how just reaching for the next level up can actually be an improvement, that we can't go from like 0 to 10, that's unrealistic. So I do appreciate that she says stuff like that. I did enjoy this book. It is, like I said, more on the fluffy side because unlike the other book, she doesn't talk a lot about like real like traumas. It's more like, she had some struggles with things like fertility, and I don't want to, downplay that, because that is a big issue for a lot of people, and some health issues, which again, I don't want to downplay, but she certainly doesn't talk about like traumas and stuff, which I think a lot of these books for people who have suffered through those kind of things can be a real turnoff, because it's like, well, when you're dealing with real serious things, you can't just like think nice thoughts and have it go away. That's not the way the world works. But she does have some, I do have to say, like, I did still enjoy this book, even if it is pretty fluffy. She does have some things in here about how, don't compare yourself to others. It's not a competition. Focus on the process and not the product. Focus on having fun. And that when people are doing that, when they're more focused on process or having fun, they tend to attract opportunities to them because they're not desperately striving for something. And I do agree with that. And letting people's stuff be their stuff, rather than taking on their judgments. So it does still have, like, I took what I could from this book, but it is, it is kind of a little more on the fluffier side, that's for sure. But still, I enjoyed the reading. I would give this maybe like, I don't know, a 3 out of 5, so to speak, because it is, like I said, I don't think if you are trying to recover from things like anxiety or depression or major mental health issues or trauma or anything like that, that a book like this is going to be super duper helpful. I think if you're already in a pretty good place, and you're just looking to kind of like boost yourself a little bit, this can be a good book. Now, for books I haven't finished reading. So in the book club, we are doing Tarot for Troubled Times. And I really do like this book, this interesting book. The first part is really talking about more like shadow work and working on yourself, and some of the negative sort of things we can get into, like martyrdom and blaming others. But then the next part goes on to more of the numerology of the tarot. So I think if you're interested in that kind of stuff, this is interesting, because it talks about how if we want to change the world, we have to first work on ourselves, which I do agree with. So we're talking more in depth about this on the book club, but I am enjoying this book so far, and when I'm done with it, I will do a full review, but I am really enjoying it, and I think that if you're really into tarot, you're into self-development, this is a really great book to pick up as well. Okay, another book I have not finished reading is the one I was going to start the fiction book club on. I'm so sorry, I just, it just didn't happen. Just busy with things and stuff, is The Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I heard a lot of people rave about this book. I got about halfway through it on about page 251, and I just kind of stopped reading it because at first I thought it was because of the romance. So here's the thing with this book. It's a witch. I'm not going to give away the whole plot, but basically she's a witch who doesn't want to use her powers, who's rejected her powers because her parents were killed and they were witches. And then she unlocks the spell unknowingly and finds this book that all these different type of supernatural creatures want, because it's got secrets in it. And then this vampire comes, and vampires and witches aren't supposed to be friends, but somehow they're instantly attracted to each other, and now he's helping her to get away from all these other entities that want this book and want to harm her. So, premise. Now, I'm not a big fan of vampires in books. I'm just not into them. That's fine. But I just find their relationship kind of implausible. Why does she suddenly trust him out of nowhere? Why is he just irresistibly attracted to her out of nowhere? It just seems hokey. I'm sorry for those who love this book. And the history part in there is very interesting, and the actual mystery around this book is interesting. It's the romance that I just can't stomach. And at first I thought, oh, maybe you just don't like romance. But then I realized that no, I actually do like, because I do like Jane Austen books. I like Bronte books, and those have romance in them. Mind you, it's more Regency, old-timey romance, but it's a little more realistic. I also enjoy fan fiction on Tumblr. I do read fan fictions on Tumblr that do involve, some of them do involve romances, some of them are hilarious, but a lot of them are written really sweetly and they seem more realistic. So I think it's just the unrealisticness of the romance that I find off-putting. I also find off-putting that the vampire character, he's overprotective of her, but he's kind of abusive actually. Like he holds her somewhere. She doesn't, when she wants to go, as she wants to leave, he entraps her for a while. His overprotectiveness is more like controllingness. And I find that incredibly off-putting. I don't find that romantic at all. I find that get away from this guy. He seems like a super, super awful control freak. So I have only read through halfway. I know there's a lot of people who love this book, but I don't know honestly if I'll be finishing it, because I find the romance off-putting, and whenever they eat something, the author goes into great detail of this fancy food, what's like. I don't care what they're eating. Maybe tell me, but don't, she'll spend a page talking about how fancy this wine and, these clams are. I don't know. It's not my thing. I thought it was because I don't like romance until I realized that I do. I just like different kinds of romance than this. So I'm very sorry to all of you who love this book, because so many people said they loved it, but I don't know if I can finish it. I don't know if the mystery is good enough to take away from the romance of this book. Romance, I use that in quotation marks. Okay, that's my thoughts on books for this month. Let me know what you think. Feel free to disagree with anything I say. You may have loved these books. If so, tell me why. I don't take it personal, don't worry. And I hope you all have a wonderful month, and I will be back next month with more books. All right, peace, love, rock and roll.